The Jets reportedly looked at hiring someone else to run the offense over Nathaniel Hackett this past offseason. Hackett himself said he was aware of the team's conversations with others, but he feels he's got the full confidence of head coach Robert Saleh. With that in mind, Aaron Rodgers with Adam Shine over the weekend was asked why the Jets and Jets fans should trust Hackett. Here's what he had to say.
Why should I trust Nathaniel Hackett as the offensive coordinator?
Well, you should trust me, and I trust Nathaniel. So to me, that's the end of the story. There's been a lot of BS that's been said out there. There's a lot of things that have gone on the last couple of years that he's dealt with that I think he's handled very professionally. And at the end of the day, I think you got to trust him and I's working relationship and the conversation that we have.
If you trust Rodgers, you should trust Hackett. Michael, news or noise?
Well, I think it's news that he went out and really basically said no more. Like, look at me. Like, you give him credit as a leader. What do leaders typically need to do? They stand in front of those they're leading, which is kind of a unique situation here, right? Because the coach should be leading the player, but in this instance, the player's leading the coach, which is essentially what's going on. And Rodgers is going to make this offense look better. There's no question. It can't look any worse. It was bad in Denver. It's been bad here. It was bad 2 years in Denver. So the question's a fair one. But when you put Rodgers and his defense of it into it, it's going to be better. The question mark that's going to come is what happens when the game starts? Who's making the adjustments? Who's fixing everything? And how is everyone getting coordinated? Yeah. The fact that the Jets thought they needed to have someone else, now could that have come from Woody? I think what's happening here is everybody in the building saying, well, Woody wanted us to look into this. So they can have absolution. They can have plausible deniability. But if you're the head coach of the Jets, you have to wonder whether you have enough systematic approach offensively to handle the rigors of the good defensive coaches in the National Football League. I think that's a fair question, and they didn't answer that.
And, Michael, I did appreciate Rodgers last week, his self-awareness that, hey, if things don't go right and they don't go to plan this year, we could all be out the door after this, which leads me to a follow-up of, like, what is the limit for the Jets, for this coaching staff to still have their jobs next year? Like, do they need to win a division title and win at least one playoff game? Or what do you think is the realm for which they need to stay?
I think that's a great question, Stormy, because if you got a 41-year-old quarterback and you win and you get to the wild card and you lose a wild card game, are you really sure you can get back there again in next year with a 42-year-old quarterback? Like, I'm not saying they have to win the Super Bowl, they're all going to lose their job, but there's no long-range plan here, right? What Jordan Travis is going to be the heir apparent to Rodgers? I don't know that. It's certainly not Tyrod Taylor. So it's a fair question you ask, because what is the long term? I think everybody's in survival mode here at the Jets. The general manager wants to survive. The head coach wants to survive. And Rodgers wants to help them all survive because they've given him everything he's wanted. I don't know what's the measurement of success. To me, it has to be a Super Bowl, because to say lose a wild card game and come back at 42 years old, we're calling them the IFers now. What are they going to look like next year? The IFers squared?
Fair point. To be the AFC's representative in the Super Bowl, the odds sitting at 11-1. Win total for the Jets, 9.5. It is juiced to the over at -150. Rodgers, 16-1 in the MVP market. Even money for comeback player of the year. The second shortest shot on the odds board for comeback player of the year is Joe Burrow, Michael, who's coming back from a torn ligament in his right wrist. And there have been a lot of questions about the recovery from this injury. He reportedly has faced no limitations so far, and his offensive coordinator, Dan Pitcher, said, quote, "We designed the whole thing to stay within the constraints of where the medical people think he should be and where he wants to be right now. But nobody's sitting here with a pitch counter. We have been smart about how we put things together." Also said he was really happy Burrow has all his range and power. News or noise?
I think it's noise. I mean, if he was out there, what's he out there for if he's not out there and ready to go? I mean, we all fully expect Joe Burrow to be 100%. Now, the question is, he's had these injuries before. Some guys have gotten hit with their hand on helmets, and it's a problem. And Burrow happens to be one of those guys. He has some hand injuries that have happened in the past. and they're going to have to do a good job about that. But I fully expect him to be 100%. I think the bigger question in Cincinnati isn't Burrow's health. Is the offensive line, Trent Brown, not part of OTAs? He's got a million excuses why he can't show up. And is Mims going to be good enough? I think that's the bigger question on this team.
8 teams in the NFL with win totals 10.5 or higher. Cincinnati's one of them. Good news, they have a last place schedule. Bad news, they play in the AFC North. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler has reported 49ers wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk is looking for Amon-Ra St. Brown money. St. Brown's extension gives him $28 million a year through 3 years, and it looks like Aiyuk is gunning for something in that neighborhood, Michael. News or noise?
Well, I think it's news, but why wouldn't he want the same deal? I mean, this is what happens is water seeks its level. One guy gets a deal done, the next guy. And Ayuk's a huge part of what the 49ers do, because when you break down the 49er passing game, everything happens inside. They don't have an outside. Aiyuk gave them 17 yards per catch this year outside the numbers. They don't have that. As good as Debo is in terms of run after the catch and basically being a running back playing wide receiver, they need a guy who could run routes and win on third down, and Aiyuk has developed into that role. So I have a feeling, to me, I think what's tying all this up, I think they want to pay Aiyuk. I think they don't want to pay Aiyuk and Samuel and Debo. I think they're trying to make some decisions on this if they can. But I think right now it's been a little iffy to do that.
We'll see how the 49ers are able to maneuver things, where things sit right now. Aiyuk set to make $14.1 million in base salary this year. Another piece of interesting wide receiver news that came out this week in a Sunday column of Charlie Walters from the St. Paul Pioneer Press. He writes, there was buzz at draft time that the Vikings wanted to move from number 11 to number 5, but it wasn't for a quarterback. Instead, to get LSU wide receiver Malik Nabers, who was ultimately picked at 6 by the Giants. Had that trade occurred, Justin Jefferson would have been traded, and Nabers would have been the number 1 receiver. Big if true, Michael. The Vikings, of course, trying to figure out what to do with Justin Jefferson in a contract we expect to reset the wide receiver market. News or noise here?
I think this is real news, and I think it's true. And I think if you're doing your job as a general manager of the team, what you don't want to do is you want guys on rookie contracts. And so what they were willing to do is exactly what they did with Stephon Diggs. They've done it once before. They traded Diggs. They picked Jefferson. They get rid of Diggs' huge contract. They bring Jefferson in at a cheap number for 5 years. Now, do they pay Jefferson $35, $36 million above and beyond, make him the highest paid receiver? Or do they go get Nabers for 5 years and essentially get the same player? Now, it's potential, but the same characteristics that Jefferson had. I think it's the right thing to do. Now, you say, well, what would have happened with the quarterback? Well, they would have gotten a boatload of draft picks for Jefferson. Somebody would have given them 2 number 1s for that. There's no question. And had they done that, they would have been in good shape. I think this is just good general managing. And don't take it personally. That's just what it is. And not enough teams think like this. They fall in love. Look, I love Jefferson. I love him. I think he's great, right? But when he eats up all the cap and we don't have enough to build a team, how do we run that? How does that happen for us? That's the challenge. So we'll see. I mean, if somebody's willing to pay him $33, $34 million and give you a bunch of draft picks, you got to seriously consider that. You really do, assuming you can hit on the draft picks.
Very interesting. Jefferson 15-1 in the Offensive Player of the Year odds. Vikings, not very high expectations. Win total sitting 6.5. Last offseason, the 49ers traded away Trey Lance to the Dallas Cowboys. He ended up being their QB3 last year. He's gunning for QB2 behind Dak Prescott and says he's at his best mentally, physically, and spiritually, knowing who he is, where he is, and able to be present. News or noise, Trey Lance entering quarterback 2 battle with Cooper Rush.
Well, he has to be on it, right? And I think there's no more pressure on. I mean, when you get all the draft picks traded for you and you come in as the guy who's supposed to carry the franchise and be the face of the franchise, you have all this pressure. And frankly, not a lot of guys are ready to handle it. I think now what Lance is really saying is, I have no pressure on me. I can just go play, which might be good. But until we watch him play, when the game is speeded up, not preseason, when the game's speeded up, we still won't know.
Yeah, haven't seen anything in an NFL game yet to prove that he can be the guy, but we'll see.